Okay, so now we're going to be looking at the problem-solving section of Chapter 6. Now, the difference between what we're doing today and what we've done earlier is that you are not given the quadratic equation. You actually have to come up with it first. Okay, and just like we did in problem solving in Chapter 1, you need to identify what it is that you're looking for, introduce those in a statement, a let statement. Here you're going to come up with your quadratic equation, and then you solve it. And when you solve a quadratic equation, you got to think about what you did in section 6.2 and in section 6.4. When we solved a quadratic, we were looking for the x-intercepts. And if we're looking for the x-intercepts, the y value equals 0. To solve a quadratic, you can do it one of two ways. You can factor it, or you can use the quadratic formula. At this point, I don't care how you solve it. Just pick one of those two methods. Then you look at your answer. Does it make sense? If it makes sense, then you write a concluding statement. And of course, you don't forget your units. So let's look at an example. You got the product. So you should be thinking, what does product mean? And product means to multiply. Two consecutive even numbers means equal. 528, what are the numbers? So I'm looking for two numbers. They're consecutive and they're even. So think about what consecutive even numbers are. So I'm just going to write an example. This isn't the answer, but this is an example. Something like 6 and 8. Those are consecutive and they're even. Something like negative, let's say, 8 and negative 10. Again, they're consecutive and they're even. So let's just look at this first set that I have. So let's look at the positives. If I don't know my number, I call the first one, I'm going to call it x. And then you think, how do you go from this number to this number? What do you need to do? You need to add how much? 2. So this one will be x plus 2. Now, if you have a question similar to this, let's suppose it was consecutive odd, do the same idea. I'm just going to take an example of consecutive odd. Okay, these are consecutive and they're odd numbers. I don't know this. I call it x. Again, think about how do you go from 3 to 5? You add 2. So this one would be x plus 2. So if it's consecutive even or consecutive odd, it's the same. Let's just look at, I'm thinking ahead to your homework. You're going to have consecutive numbers in homework. Okay, so let's think about consecutive numbers. Let's say 7 and 8. Okay, you don't know this, call it x. Think about how do you go to the next number? You add 1. So if it's consecutive numbers, x plus 1, consecutive even or consecutive odd, x plus 2. So first step, introduce those numbers. Okay, so I said let x represent one number, let x plus 2 represent the other. Okay, now I'm going to come up with my quadratic. So product, meaning I'm going to multiply these two numbers, equals 528. So it looks like this. Now your quadratic must be in standard form and it must equal 0. This is not in standard form, so I put it in standard form by expanding and then taking this 528 and moving it over. Remember to change the sign. Okay, so that's my next step. Okay, and at this point here, you've got your quadratic, it equals 0. Now you decide, how do you want to solve it? Do you want to solve it by factoring it, or do you want to solve it by using the formula? And keeping in mind, not everything can be factored, but this can be. Looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 528 and add to 2. And those numbers are positive 24 and negative 22. Okay, so now I factored it. Okay, and now you remember you let each of your brackets equal 0 and you solve for x. Okay. Now remember that this x value, these ones, is this x value right here. These are not consecutive, right? We've got two sets of answers here. So now I'm going to take this negative 24 and I'm going to add 2 to get negative 22. Then I'm going to take this 22 and add 2 to get 24. These are consecutive and these are consecutive and they're even. And then you look at it to say, okay, now does my answer make sense? Are they consecutive? Yes. Are they even? Yes. If I take negative 24, negative 22, and I multiply it, do I get 528? I do. And the same here. 22 times 24 gets 528. I'm pretty confident I've done it correctly. And then I do my concluding statement. Okay? Let's look at some more examples. Okay? Okay. So here, you're told the area of a triangle is 20 centimeters squared. You're told the altitude, which is the height. Maybe go down a little bit more. Altitude is another way to say height. We know it's 4 centimeters greater than the base. And you're asked to find the length of the base to the nearest hundredth, so 2 decimal places. Now, because this question is saying the area of a triangle, kind of gives me a hint that I'm going to be using the area formula of a triangle. And remember, the area of a triangle is your base times your height divided by 2. You're told the area is 20, so I know my area is 20. I know my height, or my altitude, my h, is 4 centimeters greater than the base. You're asked to find the length of the base to the nearest hundredth. So what are the 2 unknowns that you don't know here? Your given area, you don't know your base, you don't know your height. Put everything in terms of the same variable. It makes things so much easier. Don't call the base b and the height h. You're going to have a hard time solving it, okay? So because the height is bigger than the base, I'm going to have my unknown being the base, and I'm going to call it x. I'm going to let x represent the length of the base. Now, the one thing I know about the height, it's 4 centimeters greater. So if I add 4 to x, I get my altitude or height. Okay, now what I do is I sub into my area formula. Okay, I'm just going to do it quickly again here. So I know the area is 20. I know the base is x. I know my height is x plus 4. And now I'm going to divide it by 2. Okay, and that's what I've got here. Again, I need to simplify this. This is a quadratic, so I need to expand it, and then I'm going to have it equal 0 at some point. So I'm going to multiply this x in, x times x, x squared, x times 4, 4x over 2. Now you got to think, how do you solve this? Now remember, when you have a number equaling a fraction, the fastest way to do it is to cross multiply. Oops. So 20 times 2 goes on this side. X squared plus 4x times 1 goes on the right side. So you cross multiply, and you do that anytime you got a number equaling a fraction or a fraction equaling a fraction. It just makes things faster. Okay, so now I'm going to take this 40 and I'm going to move it over. And remember to change the sign. It does not matter what side the 0 is on. You could write it like this. Oops, that's a 4. Or you can write it like this. I prefer my 0 on the right side, so that's why I put it there. Again, I'm going to use the quadratic formula because you can't factor this. If it takes you too long to try to find the numbers to multiply a negative 40 and add to 4, it's a clue that maybe you cannot factor it. So I use my quadratic formula. I identify my a value as 1, my b value as 4, and my c value as negative 40, and I sub it into the quadratic formula. Okay? This is what we did yesterday. So because b is 4 and this is negative, I do negative 4 plus minus 4 squared, which is my b, 4 times my a value 1 times my c value negative 40. Careful here, you got a negative and a negative. That's going to change the sign, right? So then I simplify by squaring and multiplying. Remember, there's a negative and a negative, change the sign. So we have something like this. Now remember this plus minus. Remember, every time you square root something, there are two possible answers, and this is where you separate it. One where you have -4 plus the square root of 176 divided by 2, and the other one -4 subtract the square root of 176 divided by 2. Okay, now you take out your calculator. Remember, do what's in the numerator first, hit equal, then divided by 2. Okay, so you should be trying this on your calculator, because I think I told you in the last video a lot of people get to this point, and because they use their calculator wrong, they're getting the wrong answers. So do check to make sure you're getting the same answer as me. We're doing it to the nearest hundredth, so 2 decimal places. Don't forget your units. Now let's think about what x is. X is your length of your base. Now let's look at my two answers and let's see if they both make sense. This is positive 4.63 centimeters, and this is a negative. Does it make sense to have a negative base? It doesn't. So this one is not possible. I only have this one. And then that's it. I do my concluding statement. Don't forget your units. This question did not ask me for the height, so I don't need to do that. But if it did ask me for the height, then I would just add 4 to 4.63 and I would get 8.63. But because it wasn't asked, it's not necessary to answer. Okay, let's look at one last one. These are all very typical types of questions that you're going to be expected to do. And this is the last one here. Okay, so you're given a picture. It's 10 by 5, and we're going to put a border around it so that the area is 150 centimeters squared. And you're asked, what is the width of the border? Okay, I'll just see if that's okay. So this is an idea of what you're having here. So let's suppose here's your picture. Okay, there's your picture. And now you're going to, a border is like a mat. Right? You're going to put this mat around it, right? Okay, so this is 10 centimeters, this is 5 centimeters, and then we're going to put this border or mat around it like this. And uniform width means the width is the same regardless, like if I'm going to the left, to the right, up or down. Okay, so it's asked, what is this width? That is my unknown, so I'll call it x. And if this is x, then this is x. Okay, now because this has to do with area and this is rectangular, it's a clue that I'm going to be using the area of a rectangle or a square. But in order to do that, I need to know my length and my width. I know the area is 150. Now, let's figure out the length. So I'm going to do the length this way. If I know from here to here is x, from here to here is 10, and from here to here is x, what's this length right here? What are you going to do with x, 10, and x? You're going to add them. So you got 10 here, and how many x's? You've got 2 of them. So you got to collect your like terms. So x plus x is 2x. Plus the 10. That's my length. I'm going to do the width going this way. So again, what's this? This is x. What's this length? It's 5. This is x. So let's figure this out. This x plus this x, how many of them are there? 2. 2x plus the 5. That's my width. Okay, so that's what I've got here. Okay, so there's my picture. We've got our mat there. Okay, so we got 2x plus 5, 2x plus 10. I let x represent the width of the border. Okay, again, it does not matter how you write it. Area equals length times width. The a here or the a here, it does not matter. But what does matter is that I need to multiply those together. Okay, and I know it equals 150. Once again, because it's quadratic, you need to expand it. This is what you did in chapter 5. You did FOIL. You expand it. You move the 150 over because your quadratic always equals 0. Okay, So that's what I've done here. Move the 150 over, and you continue to simplify. Okay, now at this point, once again, because you're solving a quadratic, you decide how you want to solve it. Do you want to try factoring it, or do you want to use the quadratic formula? Okay, and I believe this one can be factored. So once again, you decide how you want to do it. I use the quadratic formula just to practice it. Once again, identify your A, your B, and your C, sub it in. Okay, once you sub it in, you simplify. Okay, keeping in mind that you simplify what's underneath the square root sign first, paying attention to these two negatives because that sign is now going to be positive. Again, continue simplifying what's underneath the square root sign, and this is where you separate it. Okay, the two possible solutions. One is where you add the square root of 2,500, and one is where you subtract it. Okay, now these are my two answers. Remember, you got to pay attention to what it is that you're looking for. You're looking for a width. It does not make sense to have a negative width of a border. Okay, so this is not possible. So this is my answer right here. I write my concluding statement with my units. That's it.